Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Wind Down Wednesday. Today is Wednesday, May 10th. Very excited to join y'all this evening. Please grab whatever you need to be comfortable. Hopefully, a nice, fluffy blanket, maybe some fluffy socks. How many more times can I say fluffy? But go ahead, grab what you need. I'll see you back here in 30 seconds. All right, everyone. So, welcome. I hope you're having a great week. It is Teacher Appreciation Week. So, I hope that you are just getting showered with all that you deserve, not only this week, but like all the time, but especially this week. I hope that people are coming to you and giving you those hugs and just notes of appreciation and kind words, all of the things you deserve, all of that, and so much more. But hopefully, you're in the midst of having a wonderful week. It is a crazy time of year, isn't it? Like, it is just nuts. May is like the teacher Olympics season. Sometimes literally, because I know a lot of us are doing like an Olympic day at the end of the month. So it's kind of like literally Olympics season. But there are so many events in May. And if you are also a parent or caregiver, you know that you're doing all of these May events for your students, but you're also doing it for your own kids. So it's a lot. So hopefully you're hanging in there. But if you're joining us live tonight, please say hello in the comments. We love to see you here. We love to see your participation in these chats. But oh my goodness, May is so busy. It's just really intense. And it's also like behaviors are off the wall and our routines, like our students are like losing all the routines. They're not charging their devices. They're showing up exhausted. They've got extra energy because it's getting nice out and they're staring outside the window all the time, dreaming of summer. And friendships are also like hitting like a frustration point, I think, for a lot of our students, just because they've had so much time, so much togetherness with all their peers. And now it's like hitting the fan. So it's a lot. It's a lot. Hang in there. We can do this. We got a few more weeks. We also just have the Bilingual Parent Summit. So if you attended, I'd love to hear your thoughts, maybe your favorite parts or highlights. There were just so many amazing moments. And I know that my Twitter feed was just blowing up with all kinds of great things from this past weekend. So very glad that was such a successful event. It always is. So if you joined us, thank you so much. And if not, now you can start dreaming ahead to next year and say, okay, who do I need to come? Which families am I going to tap to invite them in and kind of go together as like a team, a family, a mini family. So anyway, so we've got a lot to talk about tonight. I wanted to talk a little bit about goal setting, and it's not fun to talk about, but we're going to go there anyway. We're going to talk about scores. And it is a hot topic for all of us right now, because as we're starting to look through preliminary data, not only from Access, but like also from benchmarking, a lot of feelings come out for students, but really for teachers. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time kind of unpacking some of these things. Last week, or was it 2 weeks ago? I don't know. My concept of time is all messed up right now, just because there's been a lot going on, like personally and professionally. So my concept of time is all messed up. So please forgive me. But I recently did a virtual workshop. Make sure that you check us out on our website on Illinois Resource Center. We've got a whole lot of free virtual workshops happening like all the time. So check them out. Some are before school, some are during school, or not before. After school, some are during school, some are on the weekends. So make sure that you are checking that out. Stay tuned for all those things. But I recently did a workshop on goal setting for multilingual learners, and we went through a lot of different things. And some of the feedback that I got was certain pieces that we talked through that were helpful. So I wanted to make sure I provided some time and space tonight to kind of go through a few of those pieces. So number one, I first want to tell you this, right? Like, and I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but our students are not data sets. They are human beings. Okay. And all of those pieces of data that we are collecting on students, sometimes they're like moments for celebration. And we say, wow, this student captured so much growth on these specific assessments. And other times we look at data and we're like, oh no, what went wrong? So I want to just take a moment to remind you that no matter what the data is showing, as long as you are pouring into the hearts and minds of the students in your care, you are doing wonderful. You are doing right by them. Okay. We also, again, we take all of these assessments with our students to just track a growth over time. Not all growth can be captured in every assessment, right? Sometimes these assessments are just a snapshot of a moment in time. Okay. We can use the data to evaluate student progress. We can also use the data to kind of reflect on a student's growth over time that shows like program effectiveness and overall school experience. So when you get your access data back, that preliminary data, and you're starting to make some statements, you're starting to make some reflections, I want you to know that even if you are the only EL teacher or the only bilingual teacher or dual language teacher at that grade level for that school, I want you to know that that data is not just yours. It is a reflection of the entire school experience. Because we all know, right, that like language doesn't learn just with the EL teacher. Like you don't just get language instruction in those 30 minutes a day, right? Our students are getting language instruction all day long by everybody that they come in contact with, right? They go to PE, they go to visual art, they're in science, they're in math, they're in social studies, right? They're hitting all of these different moments of content throughout their day. And they're with all of these different adults throughout their day and all their different peers throughout their day. So while we are so hyper-focused on language development and language growth, it is not just your data alone. It is a reflection of the entire school experience. So if no one's told you that, let me be the first to tell you that. So if you are feeling any certain way about the data that's coming in, I want you to just kind of say, okay, I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to let myself process all of this. But this is a reflection of how the student is growing in language across their school day, across their school experience. While, yes, we are the instructional leaders in our spaces for language growth and language development, right? It is not just our job. It is everybody's job, okay? So that's one piece. That's one piece I just want us to hold on to. The second piece is we have to be really mindful of how we are interpreting that data, how we're interpreting that data, because I think sometimes we collect the data, we go right to our students and we're like, oh, or we go, oh, right, depending on the student, depending on what it shows. But again, I want you to just kind of take a moment, take it all in, take all the pieces. Maybe you have a journal that you're going to reflect on, or maybe like some audio note-taking device where you could just let it all out, right? But just be really careful of what you're communicating about the data to your colleagues, to your teammates, to the families, and to the students themselves. Because if we look across the day, we can find 86 things to celebrate about each individual student. So don't let just this one piece of data bring you down, bring them down. It is just one piece of data. When we're looking at collecting data and triangulating, por lo mínimo, right? At the minimum, we need 3 pieces of data to set goals or to make decisions or make recommendations, right? We need at least, if not more, at least 3 sets of data, right? We talk about triangulating our data. That's important. I would say even like 4 or 5 or 6 pieces of data is even better, right? We want to look holistically at our students. We just want to be mindful that not one piece of data is overpowering or overshadowing any other piece. Okay, we want to look at language growth. We also want to look at content growth. We want to look at social emotional learning growth. We want to look at behavior growth. We want to look at how students' motivations have grown, right? All of these different things. How have the students grown as human beings, as friends, as teammates, as classmates? As my 3rd graders always used to say, like, how are we working with our colleagues? They loved the word colleagues. They thought it was so fun. So we did a whole lot centering on colleagues. But our students have grown in a million different ways. They really, really have. And so I want us to just be mindful of like looking holistically at our kids because they have grown a lot this year. So one of the pieces that we looked at during that workshop I just did, we looked at, let me make sure I get this right because I want to make sure I say it right. The WIDA Interpretive Guide for Score Reports. So I'm going to see if I can link it. I might be able to link it here in the comments. I told y'all I'm getting a little bit better about linking things, but it's still not perfect. Oh, no, I can't. Let's see. No, I can't. I'll make sure at the very end I go back and add it in. I don't know. Sometimes it lets me and sometimes it doesn't. But if you just go onto the WIDA website and you look for the Access for ELL's Interpretive Guide for Score Reports, this is like a K-12 document. It was just released in spring of 2023, so it's brand new. But this is a really, really good thing for us to review a few times, especially as EL teachers, bilingual, dual language teachers. Like set aside time in an upcoming meeting, or like if you have like a professional learning community or collaboration time or team agenda, whatever your system calls it, put this document on your agenda. So the document itself is like 19 pages as a PDF, but like, you don't have to print it. You don't have to, waste paper, but like link it in your agenda and just take some time to go through a few pieces that I want you to really highlight is like, what does it look like when they're talking about proficiency levels and how to interpret proficiency levels? And then also how to interpret scale scores, right? The 3-digit scores. And then ways to, make plans moving forward. So look intentionally at those pages. Let me see if I can find them real quick as I'm scrolling here. Y'all know I'm not very fancy at this. If you look at like, they have an individual student score report, like example, and it'll show you, it'll kind of walk you through how to read it. So it'll describe like, this is where you find the proficiency level. This is where you find the scale score. What is a confidence band? So they'll show you all of those things. I think that's on page 4. If you're looking at it, it's labeled page 4, but it's the PDF page 5. Okay. And then on labeled page 5, but document number 6, it says use proficiency levels to. So it talks about ways to interpret proficiency levels. That's really important. If you're going to look at just a few pages, definitely look at that page. And then the following page talks about scale scores. So that is labeled page 6, but it's page 7 in the PDF. But it talks about scale scores and how we use scale scores to make comparisons across grade levels, but not across domains. So it's looking at kind of, again, how to specifically interpret each of those pieces. And then it also talks about composite scores. There's a few other pieces in that document. Like if you teach kindergarten, there's a whole section on interpreting kindergarten. So take a look at that. They talk about other things too. They give you, again, those like proficiency level descriptors for each of the domains. So that might be helpful to just kind of keep and hold on to. But if you are doing a meeting soon where you're going to talk about preliminary data, or you're starting to set goals for next year for individual students, or you're determining placement for individual students, and you're reviewing data in order to make that decision, please, please, please spend some time exploring that document. It is really important, just as a refresher for everybody on the team. Some of us have been doing this for a long time. Some of us have only been doing this for a few years, but I tell you, it will benefit the entire team. Just to, again, refresh our memories, build some capacity, build some knowledge and understanding, because when we're starting to have these conversations about data, it's just so important that we're all on the same page. Once you review it as a department or as a team, then I would go ahead and maybe share out a little bit. And the other piece, I would encourage you, highly encourage you to share that document, that PDF, with whoever is like kind of like your data manager. So in your district, like I know every district is a little bit different. Sometimes you have like maybe even like an MTSS coordinator, and they kind of deal with, data at tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Like they should be looking at access data too, because if they're in a position where they're serving all kids in the school, they need to look at all data sets of all the students in the school, right? Share this document with the principals, share this document with instructional coaches, psychs, right? Like whoever is kind of like on that student services team, and they look at data throughout the year. This is really important for them to know and to understand, and even just to have dialogue about, because many times folks in those roles do not always have an EL endorsement. They're not always as familiar with access data like as we are. So this is a really nice, and it's easy to read too. That's the other piece that I really appreciate. It's not like speaking to us at like super high, like academic level. Like it's just like, it's digestible. You know what I mean? Like sometimes we read stuff and it's like, oh my gosh, like they're trying to be so fancy. Or maybe that's just how I interpret certain things. But for this, I find it very digestible and easy to understand. So I would recommend sharing that for sure. So again, that is the Access for ELL's Interpretive Guide for Score Reports. You can find that on the WIDA website. You probably just Google it and it'll pop up. But it is like a 19-page PDF. I'm not saying, do a deep dive of all 19 pages, but like look specifically at proficiency level, scale scores, and just a few of the other pieces, because it's just helpful information. It's just good for all of us to have. So yes, I would recommend, as a multilingual department, do this resource together. And then also maybe put it on your fall agenda as well. Just because, again, many teachers come to us in like late summer and early fall, once we're kind of getting back into the swing of things for the next school year. And teachers are telling us, okay, like, I just looked, I see I have this student who is a multilingual student, and what does this mean, right? Like you gave me these scores, but what does this mean? So this would be, again, a nice, good thing to hold on to share with teachers at the beginning of the school year. Just keeping it all fresh, fresh in our minds, right? The other piece is, as we start to talk about stems and frames of like goal setting with students, we want to empower students with their data. We don't ever want students to look at their data and say, oh, I did something wrong, or I did not grow. No, friend, you grew. Let's be very clear. You absolutely grew. Let's see what was captured in this assessment. And maybe we can look at growth over the years, right? Language is so hard to capture because it doesn't get captured in the same way as some of the other skills, like math, right? Like we can look at like when students are at the early elementary years and intermediate elementary years, right? We start to track progress of like your times tables and stuff like that, like fluency of times tables. And so students are able to like record and graph all the, like, well, now I've got this much done, so now I'm going to go on to this next level or whatever, try to master all of those, right? All of those pieces. sometimes it's harder and more difficult for us to track language in that same way because language growth, like language captures, are really highly dependent on context, on confidence, on background knowledge, all of these different pieces. I always give the example, like if I was talking for 30 minutes about multilingual education, like if you said, Carly, talk for 30 minutes on a mic about multilingual education, great, I can do that. 30 minutes, no problem. But if you said, like, Carly, talk about the Super Bowl game, I won't have a whole lot to say. I watched it. I was like, I watched it on TV. But like, I'm not really like super into it. Like I like the commercials and the halftime show and stuff. But like, if you're going to ask me about content specific vocabulary of the Super Bowl, I don't know. I don't know. I know there's something called a defensive lineman, but I don't know what it is. I think they're on defense because it says it in the title, but I don't really know for sure. So language is a little bit more difficult to capture and monitor from like little snapshots in time over a short period of time. But if we look longer, across a longer period of time, we might be able to see a little bit more, right? So again, access data is just one snapshot. But if we are to look even like, I hope that these dialogues that we have with each other, once we get data back, I hope this helps us to say, okay, what other pieces of data do we have that reflect students' language growth? So if we're looking at like the platforms we already use, like Seesaw or Schoology or Google Classroom or whatever it is, and if we have students like recording their like reflections on, you know, an activity they did in science or something that they did in PE or something they did with you, right? Like they can do like a kind of like a vlog or, I don't know, just like an audio recording. And then we can see over time, how much are we growing as speakers, you know, in that content area? That could be a cool way to capture language growth too. We can't just put all of our eggs in the access data basket, right? We have to really look a little more holistically. I have, and I'll link a few of them once I'm able to link stuff. I have a few like just stems and frames that are centered on goal setting for students and reflection. I also want to just highlight, like, as we're looking, anytime we're asking students to set goals for themselves, I used to, like, this is so embarrassing and so cringy. So like, bear with me. I know already. But I used to just be very formulaic, like now set a goal, now set 2 goals for reading, now set 2 goals for writing, now set 2 goals for, like, it was just like a worksheet. Like it became a worksheet. And I realized that it was a worksheet because I sat down at a parent teacher conference and we were talking about growth over time. And the student was like sharing a goal. And then the parent was like, oh, is that something that you really struggle with? And they were like, literally, they go, no, it's not something I struggle with. I just didn't know what else to write. I was trying to finish. It was like, have you ever had that happen? It was like such a like eye-opening moment for me. I'm like, oh, they were just doing this because like I had spaces that they had to fill in. You know what I mean? So it really wasn't an authentic reflection or an authentic goal. Because I just was like, pick 2 here, pick 2 here, pick 2 here. So don't be like that. Don't be like Carly. Now I know better. So it shouldn't really be about like filling in a worksheet. It should really be authentic goal setting. But the other piece of goal setting, like when we're saying to students, like, you know, how do you want to like, you know, keep growing as a speaker? How do you want to keep growing as a writer? How do you want to keep growing in reading and listening? All these things. We also want to provide time and space to say to kids like, hey, you're really rocking at this. What do you want to keep on doing? It doesn't have to be like start something brand new. It's like, hey, you know what? I am rocking it out in this area of school or this area of language. I want to keep doing this and this and this because it's working for me right now. Or like, what are the routines and structures and like habits that I have made this year or even the last few months that have really made a difference that I want to keep doing? So like, look at maintenance too, because that's an important piece of that reflection is like, what habits are really serving me well. It's a good thing for us to do too as teachers. Like, what habits and structures and routines do I have in place that are working really well? Like, let's keep going on those. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? We don't have to say like, oh, well, now it's May, now I have to change it up. That doesn't make sense. And then the other piece, of course, is celebration. So we want goal setting, we want maintenance, and we also want celebrations. So we want to say, like, you know what? Here are some things that I did really well. Maybe it didn't show up in this assessment or this assessment, but I know it's working because I'm more confident, or I know it's working because I got this, this moment, or I grew from beginning to meets in a content area assessment, right? So like giving students moments to acknowledge when they have felt good or when they have felt success, because it doesn't have to be success based on our benchmarking systems, right? How do they interpret success? We want them to kind of own it. And then, oh goodness, it's already getting late, you guys. I had so much other stuff that I wanted to share. So I'll link a few of those kind of stems and frames for reflection. But I also wanted to share because this gets brought up too. So if you are in like a dual language or a bilingual program, number one, our kids are assessed all of the time, right? Because not only do we need the content assessments and the content benchmarking, we also need the language benchmarking in English. And many times we also need the language benchmarking in their heritage language, right? Whatever the additional language of instruction is. So it is a lot of assessment. So whenever we're sitting down with students in a bilingual or dual program, or who are just multilingual, we want to provide time and space that is dedicated to saying, and how are you also honoring your additional language, your heritage language? And so again, depending on your program and things like that, one thing that worked really well for my students, this is going back, I was in third grade. So I was a dual language teacher and a bilingual teacher in a transitional program. So language allocation plans changed over the years. But something that I did that worked really well for my students, because they were like, you know what, Mrs. Spina, like, I need a way to kind of capture like even like my independent reading habits, because there was a period of time where we were like, here's our mini lesson, this is what we're working on, this is the skill we're working on. And there were some times where I was like, I really want you diving into this skill right now in Spanish. So that's like the target language for right now. I really want you reading a book in Spanish. And then there were other days where I was like, I want you to choose if you're going to work on this skill in English or Spanish. And again, depends on your program models, your goals, your language allocation, all of those pieces. But for those moments during the year, during those seasons where we said, try this skill out in the language of your choice, the students needed a way to kind of measure how much time they were dedicating to doing their independent practice in each language. And so here's something that worked for us. And this is going to be really like simple and silly. So plain piece of paper. I will say this. If you teach like anywhere like fourth grade and up, don't use circles, use squares. And let me show you why. Let me just doodle this out real quick. So anytime, kids, anytime we have like two circles next to each other, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? They're going to draw something else, or they're going to label it something inappropriate. Okay. So maybe use squares and rectangles instead, but it's like a Venn diagram, but instead it's a square or a rectangle. Okay. And so on one side, they're going to label one language. On the other side, they're going to label the other language. Okay. So for me, I taught in English and Espanol. All right. So I labeled it English, Espanol, and both. And so here's what they did. They kept this on their desk either for a week or 2 weeks. I ended up moving it to 2 weeks and later because it was just harder for me to track as a teacher, like just with my caseload. Like I just couldn't handle it. So 2 weeks worked really well for me. But anytime the student said, okay, I'm going to take today and I'm going to do my independent practice in Espanol. So they would draw like a heart or a smiley face in that box, right? And so after a few weeks, after, again, maybe 5 days of instruction or whatever, 2 weeks of instruction, they would have a certain number of hearts or smiley faces or whatever in each of those boxes. But I really liked this because the students were the ones tracking this data, and they were able to kind of say, look, I spent a lot of time. I have a pretty good balance here. And on certain days, I was kind of bouncing back and forth between English and Espanol because I can do that because I'm amazing. So that was a really cool thing that students did. And then based on that too, like they might even say like, whoa, I have a whole lot in Espanol. I really need to, try to incorporate more English reading, again, to have like some type of balance. But it also led to a lot of really good conversations about like, why was I leaning more towards this language? Sometimes it's resources, like just the amount of text that we have available for that unit, for those skills or whatever. Other times it was like a comfort thing. So like I love reading fiction in Espanol, but when I'm reading nonfiction, I tend to lean more on English. Isn't that interesting? So it helps me kind of just develop some understandings and awareness of how I language and why, right? When I am left to choose. So you could do this for writing, you could do this for reading, you could even do this for like think, pair, share kind of structures or 3PS structures for, oral language. Anytime we're saying to students like, feel free to do this activity in the language of your choice. That is a simple way to incorporate and invite heritage language into any like any class period at any moment. Just inviting that in. Like if you have a shared language, feel free to do this part in, English or Spanish. So students can kind of track their oral language interactions, and maybe not in every class because that would sound really exhausting and kind of boring, and I might get burned out on that a lot. But maybe I'm just going to look at this for science. Or maybe, again, just depending on program models and goals and how you are structuring your language support. But something cool to kind of consider and play with. I also had a few variations on that. So let me draw them out real quick just so you can kind of see. So I would set up like 2 boxes that were not connected. And these ones would really kind of be more of like a calendar. And so I would label them like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And so I would have that like just kind of 5 circles to represent a week. And I would do that in both boxes. And then I would label each of them with those languages of the program. So English and Bulgarian, right? Okay. And so if a student said, okay, for my brainstorming in my writer's notebook this week, I brainstormed in English on Monday, on Tuesday and Wednesday, I brainstormed in Bulgarian. Thursday, I did a little bit of both. So I'm going to put both there. And then Friday, I brainstormed mostly in English. So you see, again, it's just like a little tracking system for students just to be able to say, like, this is me just kind of, again, setting goals for myself, setting, just building awareness of how I'm languaging and why. And again, this is probably not something you would do all the time because it sounds really boring after a while. Like, oh, we have to track it again. You might even change up how you're tracking throughout the school year. But again, just a cool way to kind of build some awareness and understanding of how we're languaging. All right, y'all. So it's already late. Holy cow, that time really flew. I will share a few of those resource documents in the comments. But just as a friendly reminder, I'm going to say this again. If your scores don't look the way that you wanted them to, or if you're like, oh no, this student should be getting this score, they should be exiting the program, or why did their scale scores go down, or whatever we're saying, I want you to take a breath. And I want you also to remember, my colleague Gary Riskin told me this once, and I have hung on to it for years and years and years because I went to him and I was like, why did these scores went down? Like, this is not an accurate reflection of what these kids can do. And he said to me, Carly, calm down. You didn't unteach them. They didn't unlearn with you. And I was like, oh, are you sure? He's like, yeah, I'm sure. You didn't unteach them. They did not unlearn. So Gary Riskin, I'm still holding on to that. And I still appreciate that so much. So y'all, if you need to hear that message, that's our friend Gary. We love Gary. He's going to share that with you through me today. Our students are not data points. Our school data is our school data. It's a reflection of overall school experience. But keep setting those goals. Keep setting those goals for yourself, for your students, for your program. If you need any support, please hit us up. If you ever just need a pep talk, please hit us up. We're here for you. We got you. All right, y'all. Have a great rest of your week. And I hope, again, you're getting all the love and appreciation this week for Teacher Appreciation Week. See you next time.